There we go. Looks like we are live. Welcome everyone. It is Wednesday and it's the ViaMonstra Academy office hours. Your chance to ask us any questions you might have on MDT, Intune, ConfigMgr, imaging, Windows in general, whole deal of infrastructure also, as long as it's at least tied to the Microsoft sphere of things. I'll be happy to answer those questions. My name is Johan. I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. And by all means, if you have any questions, feel to, for those of you that are in the Zoom meeting, please put them in the Q&A feature here in Zoom. And for those that are joining us live on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, I do have a chat window open so I can see most of those messages coming in as well. So let's see here what we have. Friendly reminder to do my updates. Absolutely, I will do them after this session, not in the middle of it, because that's my demo server. And if you have an Hyper-V host with this many VMs, and most of them are actually up and running, rebooting in the middle of demos, then it's not recommended. But thank you for that friendly reminder there. Tim had a question. What's the best way to troubleshoot which settings there are in effect when you're using both group policy and Intune CSP? I haven't seen any good conflict comparisons. The recommendation is to try to avoid doing that, of course. Some services like deliver optimization, it doesn't really care who sets something. If a group policy sets setting 1 and a CSP or a settings catalog setting sets settings 2, DO is actually one of the services that will happily accept both of those inputs and okay, cool, we're good. Challenges, again, where we have the conflicts and nothing that comes to mind top of my head in terms of conflicts. The only thing I've been using for the group policy part against Intune is more or less trying to see which policies that work. So I've been, I think I showed you this in one of the earlier office hours. Now when I have a working tenant again, still have a broken admin account, but that's another story. At least I can go back to it. Intune had some issues recently where some admin accounts were simply didn't have any access anymore, and recreating one solves the problem. Still trying to figure out why the original got broke, or break down, but no, nothing yet. But basically on your devices in your group policy analytics, this is why I have previously updated my local group policies just to try to figure out in how bad of a shape I am. But this doesn't really help the local conflict. If anyone on the call have an idea, feel free to chime in any comment or anything, but I haven't seen any good solution for do that comparison. I mean, you can open the registry keys and compare and whatnot. They are usually quite similar in nature, but yeah. The Intune policies have their own registry hive and group policies have their own registry hive. So it's different. Great question though. If I come up with something until next Wednesday, I'll be sure to mention it. I'm just looking for a piece of paper where I can scribble down my note. Should probably go ahead and share this one also, so people on the stream would have a chance to see what's going on. So, all right, GPO conflicts. Intune. All right, excellent. Jesse on YouTube had a question regarding filters now when they are generally available. What are your thoughts about filters versus basically dynamic security groups? That's an easy one. I absolutely love the filters. I have not enjoyed the way dynamic security groups have been working in Intune, because in larger tenants, they have been so slow to update sometimes. So it's basically causing me some troubles. These days, I use these dynamic groups primarily for things that doesn't have to be instant. For example, like licenses and things like that. But in terms of dynamic groups or Autopilot and what other things, I try to stay away from that. The filters are almost instant in their way of working. And even though I would like to see more options on the filters, I still think that is a great start for Intune. So for those of you who haven't seen it, Microsoft documentation is pretty good there. It's an Autopilot script I was reviewing earlier. But Intune, filters, assignment, because it's on the assignment that you work with these filters when you send the group. But really good solution. You can have a filter that applies a specific whatever to a given model, given vendor, whatever any of these, all these properties are that you have available. So if you haven't seen this feature, highly recommend to take a look at it. I'm posting a link in the chat for you for those of you in the Zoom call. And these links are later uploaded to our site as well. So if you go to the Academy and scroll down to our office hours, once you enroll here, it's free to enroll, then you have all the past recordings together with all the past links that have been posted on these Wednesdays. Jerome says hi from France. Hello there. Welcome to our little chat here on the office hours. All right. Any other questions? Happy to answer. All right. Isaac had a question regarding in-place upgrade sequences. Let's see. It was a fairly long one, so give me a second. All right. I think I can summarize this question as basically how can we improve that experience when using sequences, especially if you're going from Windows 10 to 11, we're evaluating that, and we may have to reinstall or even remove applications as part of that process. Well, that's one of the main reasons I still to this day for most customers, recommend to use sequences to do in-place upgrades, but not just one sequences, actually multiple sequences. This was a concept for those that are familiar with it, that the famous big bank corporation on Twitter, or large bank sometimes they're called, their engineers posted a lot of their findings they have been working on when implementing in-place upgrades in their environment. And they provide sequences for download, these engineers, as well as a bunch of tips and tricks around this solution. For example, Mike Terrell, on his blog, a lot of into Teslas also, but he do have an entire table of contents somewhere here that explains a lot of their thinking and processes around Windows as a service. And while this wasn't written for Windows 11 in mind, you will find that a lot of these are very, very valuable for that as well. So if you haven't read up on this content, and that's a good chunk of reading in it, I highly recommend it. Good stuff right there. The way I do it for most of the customers I've been working with, done a little over 100 migrations now, and after a while you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. So I have multiple sequences. I have one sequence that I use for validation of the machines. So that's usually a quite small sequence where I simply push out some basic controls like, all right, do they have enough disk space? Do they have enough memory? Are their clients and not accidentally refreshing a server? Do they have power, network adapter? Is it not wireless? Is it in UEFI mode? Just basic controls. And then the more critical one is this one here, which is basically these two checkboxes will do a scan of the old machine and report that result, and you can review that result. If this one fails, well, then you kind of know that the system is not ready. If it succeeds, then at least you have a fighting chance to upgrade that one for real. So the way I deploy these is that I make a note of the deployment ID and I track the status of that one. And I use that to build different collections. So I will have one collection for the ones that fails, one for the one that succeeds. The one that fails, I will have help someone at help desk to look into. The one that succeeds, I can now go ahead and deploy my real upgrade sequence too. So this is also a fairly short sequence in this case where I'm just doing the upgrade part. So again, some basic readiness because they're lightning fast, but then I actually go ahead and do the upgrade. And since this is a sequence, this is where you can add in additional things that should happen before the upgrade, remove an application, remove a driver, whatever you need to do. And you can put in a lot of stuff that allows you to fix things that the upgrade either broke or just something you need to change afterwards. So this very process is solid, it's well tested. It takes a bit of longer time to set up, but by all means, it's usually worth it in the end because it allows you to do larger scale servicing and then be more or less guaranteed that you will have a good result for those. So Tim is asking, what about troubleshooting feature upgrades that are done through Intune? Does Intune have any method of retrieving the failure codes? I haven't seen a ready-made inventory action for that, but you can have proactive remediation script collect that information and report it up to Intune, and you can run those as often as you like. So you can have your feature update however you run it. Now, run it and inventory that data because it's inside of Windows once you have done a feature update, whether it was good or not so good. I have even seen organization borrowing a solution I blogged about years ago when Intune didn't have any reasonable feature updates in it. I figured out how you can use, this was back in 2018, but you can actually, if you don't mind scripting a little bit, run MDT sequences from Intune. So of course, this is a sequence, you can go every aspect of it. If you want to write some inventory data into the registry that you query later in the script, by all means do that, whatever you need to do. So there are certainly ways to achieve what you may be used to in ConfigMgr up in Intune. As usual, we have our friends at Endpoint Manager, John, Maurice, and Sandy, among others. They have written some download amazing reporting around similar items like readiness and whatnot for Windows 11 and feature updates and success codes and whatnot for those. So allows you to track progress better, I think, than what you do natively in Intune. I like what the community comes up with in terms of sort of compensating for the lack of reporting that is in the platform by default, at least for now. I'm hoping that Microsoft at some point will catch up on reporting, because if you have ConfigMgr and you compare its reporting together with Intune's reporting and inventory, it's a 90-day difference. So hopefully they will catch up, but for now, you have to work a little bit to get the same result. Jerome on YouTube, no, LinkedIn. He was on LinkedIn before. Sorry. Just added a note there that he found a problem with the PowerShell deployment kit with 1180K, and it works now. Yay for that. I'll be very interested to know what was causing that problem, because we are starting to shift over to 80K11 in a lot of environments right now. So please drop me an email or a tweet on that one. I'm very interested to hear about how you solved that problem. Good stuff. Let's see what else. Brad had a question on what are your thoughts on implementing Power BI dashboards? Absolutely fantastic idea. I haven't seen any ConfigMgr customer using this stuff that is in here, because last time I checked, this was still requiring a Power BI server platform, which is stupidly expensive. Most organizations that are using Power BI, they're using the regular Power BI for desktop, either the free version or the paid version. And there are so many dashboards out there that you can download and use. And if you think of it, we're just tapping into existing data. It's not like we are changing data, we're just viewing stuff that is out there. The biggest repository out there is still the good folks over at System Center Dudes. They recently announced their subscription for their services, but they have been for years providing different solutions that are also based on Power BI. So for example, they have an OSD tracking dashboard that is completely based on Power BI, and highly, highly recommended. I mean, even good friend Jordan Bensing back in the days, he wrote a nice little OSD dashboard that I like. This one is priced right because this one is free. But again, using Power BI, you can download this and import and use. Highly, highly recommended. I even seen organizations like MVP David Seban in New York. I still think he's New York. He wrote some Power BI tools for MDT Lite Touch. So not ConfigMgr, but two parts. You have the best screenshots in part 2, but this is basically we're using Power BI to tap into the deployment data that you have in the environment. If you haven't seen these, I'll be happy to post the link for these guys. I love tapping into data with basically any means necessary. It could be reporting, it could be Power BI, it can even be PowerShell scripting. I was working on one environment recently. I wanted to track peer-to-peer efficiency, so I know I had the data available. PowerShell scripting to grab it, output a report, done. Love it. Shri is asking if you can create sequences for a kiosk mode setup in MDT Lite Touch. I haven't done it, but I know that you can apply a provisioning package during a sequence using DSM. So if you have a provisioning package that applies those right settings, that might be a way to do it. Otherwise, Autopilot or Intune is probably a better option, assuming you have internet access on the device, because it's kind of a requirement for that. But yeah, possibly through DSM. It's a good try. But I haven't done it. I believe even the latest version of the configuration designer supports those basic scenarios. Apparently have it loaded somewhere. Yeah, there are some kiosk device scenarios pre-configured on this one still. Might be able to borrow some of that to do it offline or without internet access. All right, let's see. Radu had a question. From your experience, what's the proper approach while implementing Windows Hello for Business from Intune over the classic Windows Hello in a hybrid environment? Well, that one is easy to answer. I haven't tried that, so I actually don't know. Good news, though, I know one who does. Mr. Ben Whitmore with Cloudway. So these folks here, they're running some of our trainings here at the Academy. See if I can find Ben here. Here we go. Mr. Ben Whitmore. You can find him on Twitter and Byte Ben Byte. Good Lord, I should remember this. Embarrassing. It's one of the two at least. It was Byte Ben. All right, here we go. Let me get to that link. Reach out to this fine gentleman on Twitter, and he can probably help answering that question. And sorry, Ben, for putting me on the spot here, but he's usually happy to help. So put that link in the chat for you. He has written tons of blog posts on regarding Windows Hello. And I'm planning on learning code to copy and paste also at some point. All right. See what else. Follow-up comment from Jerome was the gateway. Bits is not happy when the default gateway is missing. And yes, that's something I have seen in regular ConfigMgr environments lately, where I accidentally, or not accidentally, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't realize the consequences, but I turned off one of my default gateways because the clients I were working with were actually on the same network as my site servers, so I didn't need my default gateway. But it turned out that the ConfigMgr Client were not happy when there was a default gateway configured that it couldn't reach. So it actually broke my deployment. The solution was to turn on the router again, so it wasn't too hard. But apparently Bits and even the client installation here that is using Bits in the background likes to have a default gateway that is reachable. Pretty sure this is a bug, but that's just the behavior of it. All right. Andrew, I see that sneaked into the office hours as well. He is one of the co-instructors here on the Academy. He just posted a bunch of links for additional Power BI bash. He just posted a bunch of links regarding different Power BI dashboards that the community has been putting together. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay. Another question, this one on Teams. How to properly update your Teams app in an enterprise with minimal administration that includes laptops, desktops, thin clients, and VDIs. That one I don't know, I'm afraid. I mean, the auto updating part is easy, but to simplify the management, if you want to deploy the app, especially for VDI machines, I don't know about that one, I'm afraid. We'll have to put that one on the back burner. I'm making a note, see if I can find out something until we meet next Wednesday there. All right, any other questions? I'll be happy to answer. Have a whopping 30 minutes to spare or to go. I do like to announce also that for those of you following this stream on YouTube, we have now set up a dedicated YouTube channel for these office hours for the Academy. So we are right now streaming to 2 different YouTube channels, but going forward, we will switch over to the new one as soon as we get some content added in there. So this is actually the first day that we are streaming into this new channel. So always fun. All right, any other questions at all? Oh, that was one that I missed on LinkedIn earlier. Sorry about that. What's the difference between WFP policies and desktop analytics deployment plans? Well, desktop analytics is going away. I think they announced the retirement, was it later this year? I forgot. I have to look that one up. November. So I wouldn't put in too much of new work into that platform. I will more focus on update compliance and endpoint analytics, which is different from desktop analytics. So, but in terms of policies, this is what you usually configure here to manage your various software updates. And you can also do the similar thing with feature updates, of course, but this is probably the recommended way to configure those rather than trying to do something with desktop analytics as of now, since it's going away in just a few months here. See what else. Got a comment for the screen being better. Yep, I went back to my old setup rather than trying to loop everything through OBS, because that actually made the screen a little bit blurry for some of the viewers, and that I went back to having basically 2 cameras instead. So that works. All right. Let's see. What's the proper way in ConfigMgr to track the audit scope applications that are used in the entire organizations like Adobe, Visual, Tableau, Camtasia, Snagit, etc.? Well, the only way to sort of audit apps in ConfigMgr, other than just track the installation, which is done through inventory, it's the software metering component. And that's one component that will happily track usage, at least for now, of various applications that you have in the environment. So here's a demo app I added. I want to track the usage of this one. Here are some that are default created. Some of them are enabled, some are not. But you can certainly track usage of apps this way. And there are some reports around this that you can run when the tracking has been running for a little bit. So there is a few software meeting reports that you can play around with to either use, you can even ask for specific programs in your environment. And of course, you can create new reports, customize these, edit them. There are a lot of additional reports you can buy or download as well from the community for this. So this would be a feature for audit, that kind of usage, I think. If that was what the question was about there. Harry is asking, have I ever managed Microsoft Team Room through Intune or ConfigMgr? Nope, I have not. Not the faintest idea. If anyone happen to know that is in listening to this, feel free to give me a ping in the chat or in the chat here in Zoom, and I will relay that information. All right, any other questions? Have some coffee while I'm waiting. Don't see any no questions coming in. We'll give it a little bit more time to see if someone chimes in with something. Hope I didn't miss anyone. Here we go. Have you ever done a demo blog post on how your lab is configured? I have done that quite a few times, and some of it is covered in this one here. We've been running this quarterly. These are free courses, community courses that we run. But this is an hour and a half, 2 hours on how to spin up a lab environment. And I am showcasing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in my lab for this environment. Me and Andrew here on the Academy, we did get some sessions at MMS as well. So, and MMS is in May, and those sessions are about this specific topic. So you can kind of expect additional content to come out shortly after MMS in that area as well. But I'm a big believer of having access to good lab machines. The bigger Hyper-V host, the better, or the better VMware host, the better. But I can have probably a good 100 VMs running in this lab, different networks. I'm using different routers to provide traffic in between them, but it allows me to test and play around with so many different scenarios like that. It's just great to have that. I did put together a little documentation once of how my network looked, my virtual network, and how it ties into physical. Made a nice little Visio diagram. So this is my home lab, basically. 4 different routers, a bunch of different subnets. Some are physical, some are virtual. But this allowed me to spin up a good few hundred VMs in total, because the hosts I'm using is primarily used HP's 8040s. You can get them on eBay for about $500-700 these days, but you can cram in a good extra CPU in those. You put in some memory, and you have a machine that can run a lot of VMs. And I have multiple of these. So I have one here apparently needs updates too. This is how I do some of the scripting for these, just using PowerShell Direct to tap into the VMs. But these are primarily client VMs running. So I have a lot of my servers on one host and I have a lot of clients on another host. But all in all, this together with the 20-some multiplexes I have, I can have a lot of VMs running on very little hardware. But we do go through the setup tips and tricks. And of course, if you join these courses when they're live, like this, you have the chance of asking a question and okay, the router, how did you do that one? Stuff like that. So highly recommend. The price is just right. Just enroll for free. If you cannot wait for the next day, the recording is indeed available from Thursday, January 20th, from last month. So you can review that one. And we will run again in mid-April, give or take. So, yeah, I hope I answered that question. Todd is asking any tricks for troubleshooting Azure AD Hybrid Join errors. Well, the best way would probably be to avoid it completely, but I'm very aware of that. Not every organization have that luxury. The Autopilot diagnostics module can give you some information about what's happening. That one is pretty good. The event log is pretty good. And you can even do ETL tracing if you need to during the process. But this is painful. This is tricky. I've seen organizations spending months, literally, to get hybrid join up to a sort of a reliable working scenario. And in this case, that was a comment about actually having Microsoft folks on site, and even they would struggle with this. So yeah, the hybrid join scenario is so sensitive from a timing point of view because there are so many things happening at a very short time. I know that Richard Hicks, who joined us 2 weeks ago on the Academy, also for a free course on Always On VPN, he actually covered some of the troubleshooting aspects in this course, and that recording is also available if you haven't seen it. So good info there. You do cover hybrid Azure AD Join in some extent in this training. So maybe that would be a good start. Of course, the blog post I usually plug in these scenarios, Rudy Ohms over from the Netherlands, I believe. Deliver us from hybrid. It's a good reading. If you haven't seen it, this post has been updated over time as well. But this basically goes through a lot of these scenarios, and it's a very good read. So I'll post that in the chat. And here we go. I probably showcased this link 5 or 6 times here on the office hours by now. Richard Nilsson is asking, do you know any problems with ATPS and ConfigMgr 2111? I have not. I mean, there have been some hotfixes released for 2111. One primarily for the platform itself, the rollup, and then we also have the hotfix to make the connected cache work correctly with Win32 apps. But I haven't seen anything specific for ATPS happening. So unless you find it on Twitter or in user groups and whatnot, on work groups on LinkedIn, I'm afraid that's going to be a support case if you see something going on after an upgrade. Yeah. Question from Piotr on LinkedIn. Hi from Poland. How to make config manager apps that removes previous version installs. Okay. The scenario is you want to basically do superseding, mainly replacing an old version with a new version, but you want to have additional things in between, like a reboot. For those type of scenario, sequences are typically still the best. It's not the only way. You can certainly deploy these in ways. You can deploy an uninstall first and have it reboot the system, and then you deploy the new version and have it install. But if you want to do things in a sequence, task sequences are usually quite good for that scenario. So I would recommend go with sequences for those kind of things. Because in the console here, as you guys probably know, it's a quite common scenario that you create custom sequences that are there only to do certain things. So like an app-only sequence where you would add in the various stuff that you need. If you need to install an application, you can do that, whatever that app might be. Chrome, great. And then you can add a reboot, and then you can install something else, or whatever that may be that you need to do in between. I usually prefer sequences to get better control for these scenarios rather than the supersedence part in ConfigMgr. Radu had a question. What's your opinion on deploying apps during the Autopilot deployment versus classic ConfigMgr sequences where you can order the apps yourself? So basically the scenario is here that we are indeed using Autopilot scenarios, and in our let's see if I can find it. In our properties for the status page, this is where we have configured, for example, that we want certain apps to be installed, and we want better control in how and what order and placing of these apps, basically compared to a ConfigMgr sequence. First of all, this status page is not really intended to do like 50 app installation, because that's going to take a very, very long time. You're going to have an upset user having to sit down and wait for those apps to come down. There is some integration with Cloud Management Gateway and Autopilot, where you actually can have the Autopilot process starts a sequence that installs stuff that you want in a certain order. I have even one of our customers that asked me to write a little GUI that popped up that allowed them to select what apps they wanted in that phase because they were using the sequence. Sequence can have condition, and it was fairly easy to group them together by role and basically ask, okay, what department do you belong to? Well, I belong to a business unit, the marketing unit, and therefore I should have the following 25 apps. But if you want to have that granular control, this is not where you put that in. You need to have some logic flow that deals with it. It's really not easy to compare. It's more like if you want to have that super rich control for a lot of apps, sequences are more or less the only option to get that control. If you're just interested in getting that deployed out there, well, you can just do a deployment and they will show up at the client when they so decide to show up when the policies comes down. But as I mentioned earlier, you can certainly come up with your own custom scripts that launches standalone sequences from Intune, like I was doing for my feature upgrades. but these are more like edge case scenarios and definitely not something that is sort of supported in their product per se. All right. Another question regarding sequences, how to automatically rerun sequences when there was an error exit. In the deployment of a sequence, you can certainly have a rerun on failure. What, however, is when you push out a sequence to a client. I wonder if I have anything that I've been deployed recently. Uh, you do have an execution history of everything that happens, including sequences that they will show up here. And if we imagine that this, for example, was a sequence, which is obviously it's not the ConfigMgr Client upgrade, but let's imagine that this was a sequence. If you delete this key and force the machine policy again, you will see that sequence like, oh, we're good to go. And it's going ahead and do it. I know that the right-click tools, at least for apps and packages, have a rerun option. Let's see if it was on the deployment itself or it's on the app itself. Don't remember. Let's see here. Yeah, rerun deployment. So you can go ahead and enforce a rerun. I believe it shows you a list of either machines or collections when you run it. So maybe something like this. Might have it on the machine level also, thinking of it. Just going to bring up one of my clients and see. Not that collection. I was planning to go to the other one. I picked one that wasn't online. Should have someone in here. Is happy. Here we go. I love right-click tools, by the way. Downright amazing, always has been. Oh, I don't see it on the client level. Yeah, there it is, right in front of my eyes. Yeah, so this is where I can pick packages, but it doesn't show. It actually supports sequences now. Good, problem solved. You can go to the device or collection and rerun sequences that way also. Or just delete the registry key I showed you, and it will do the same thing. All right, good stuff. Jerome is asking, can MDT support the ESD WIM format one day? Well, supposedly not until the ConfigMgr team that now develops MDT actually updates the product to support it. Because ConfigMgr sequences, as you guys probably know, if I have an upgrade sequence, I don't have to use a WIM file. I can use a ESD file that is part of my feature updates. The beautiful thing about these guys is that you don't pay for them when you download them. But if you download a WIM file from a cloud management gateway, you have to pay for that WIM file. I saw some community solution that figured out a way to trick MDT in thinking that the WIM file is, sorry, that the ESD file is really a WIM file. Forgot, was it Damien? Memory. I'm getting old. Can see if I can find it real quick. MDT link ESD task sequence. Basically getting a lot of replies of folks being a little bit angry about MDT doesn't support it natively, and yeah, that is correct. My search skills are with me today. I do not find that post. I just stumbled across it. Just a tweet flowing by at some point. I'll see if I can find that one later and send out a tweet with a link to it. Forgot who it was that worked on it. Basically, the trick was to import we import the WIM file, but then instead just replace that with a fake pointer in the script in some way. All right. Got some folks posting some good links in the chat here. This was for questions regarding maintenance in general. So this post by Brian Dam is indeed really good for automation of all the management runs, software updates, and also cleanup and declining and combining software groups and whatnot. And then there is a ton of resources here as well. I'm going to put that in the link section. So the question was basically regarding good maintenance for software updates. I did put down a blog post 4 years back when we were troubleshooting all these WSUS issues that started when Windows Update forced every client to read down the full catalog. That was interesting month. But this is just a list of resources related to preparing, being a little bit proactive rather than putting out fires for WSUS. Todd is asking, will you guys do any in-person training this year? So far, the only one I know of is MMS. As I mentioned earlier, me and Andrew, we got a bunch of sessions. We got 4 sessions here in early May. So if you don't mind heading out to Minneapolis, to Mall of America in May, this is by far the best conference to learn about the Intune Config Manager and pretty much everything in between. Company I work with, 2Point Software, will be there. Patch My PC will be there. Microsoft will be there. Members from the product groups, as always. Amazing sessions, deep dive content. There is no better conference. Good stuff. Put that in the chat for you. All right. Matt is asking, how can we upgrade from Windows 10 1703 to 21H2? I have not tried. I have done an 1809 all the way, but I would not be surprised if you have to go to something in between, like going from 1703 up to 1909 and then up to 21H2. I bet very few organizations have tested that scenario. If it works, but you may have to go into an intermediate version. I mean, 1703 has been a while since it went out of support, so that means there is little testing going on these days for those kinds of upgrade. Follow-up question to that one, what are you recommending when companies have more than 11 versions of Windows 10? I don't know, liquor, something to dampen the pain a bit. That's no fun scenario, having to maintain that many different versions of Windows 10. That's pretty much every version there is, almost. Upgrade as soon as you can. Get rid of these older versions. I get that you cannot have one single version at all time, but you definitely can have two if you put your heart into it, at least from a technical point of view. Because you cannot upgrade them all overnight, you will always be on some different versions. But 11 versions, that might be a new record, actually. I usually get a little bit scared when I see 5 versions, so 11 is like, that's a lot. Yeah, amazing. Good questions. Thank you so much, everyone. See if there are any others out there. Follow-up question regarding reporting. Yeah, I do recommend using Power BI for stuff to drill into data. It's amazingly good. Brad is asking, okay, in a co-managed scenario, what about doing updates, for example, for Office through Intune and not from ConfigMgr, or from CDN and not from ConfigMgr? Well, you can certainly set up policies that allows Intune to take over the workload for updates. I know some organizations actually have done that because they like the simplicity about it. The challenge with Office updates in general is that they can take quite some time to come down from Intune. But other than that, it's a valid scenario. It's a supported, tested scenario. Don't see the harm in changing the workload for that one if you don't like to have to deal with those in ConfigMgr. But please note it's the software updates workload you're changing, so it will be for basically everything there. All right. It's funny, me and Andrew, we basically spent a good 2 hours Monday just going through those various scenarios in one of our trainings. But basically we spent 2 hours alone on just software updates and how they are different. So there is a lot to it, but it works quite well these days. Intune has come a long way in terms of dealing with updates, and with the updates for business have come a long way. If you're looking for a resource in general for those, let's see what that one is. We did a user group setting back in November last year, where we had Arya Carly joining us for a Windows patching session. That recording is available up on our YouTube channel if you want to review that one. Only half an hour, but great content on software update in Intune and the changes has been done recently. Aria also did an amazing session at Ignite using one of those really fancy light boards to take notes on. And if you're not following her on Twitter, you should get that up right now, actually. Give me a second. This is a great resource for everything, software update, good info almost every day. So recommend follow her. And even better news, she's coming to MMS in May. So if you haven't booked your flights yet, that's a good time to do it, or head over to that conference. All right, I see that we are actually a few minutes over here. Thank you for sticking in there with us, and thank you for all the good questions. And I hope to see you again next week, that we will run on a different time. Believe it was, yep. Next Wednesday we run at 9 in the morning, so give people in Europe a chance to join without having to spend the entire night out just to attend this. So once again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your week.